Tonight, the latest shots fired by the U.S. president in his trade war, week 2 of the federal election campaign, and the Liberals continue to gain ground, by the way. Plus, the great one, a blemished legacy thanks to his association with the president. From Montreal, this is episode 27 of Night Talk. I'm Gary MacDonald.
And the final episode in 2025 from Tulum, Mexico, Eddie Tkalik. Coming home, Gary, coming home.
That's right. This time next week, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It'll be kind of strange not to have you bouncing all over the place.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, it's we're both looking forward to coming home, bringing my stepson's dog home with us. So yeah, it'll be a new adventure.
Yeah. Oh, will it ever? Well, that means Rocky will have a playmate.
Absolutely. There we go.
Well, Eddie.
And she's female, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Let's see now. Where was I? Yes. There's lots to discuss. It was quite a late afternoon, very busy late afternoon. So let's dive into this whole scenario and let's look at what's been happening with the trade war. Yeah. So it's about 3 hours ago, the U.S. president came out to the Rose Garden of the White House and announced that he was expanding his trade war, hitting more countries with tariffs. And for Canada, it appears we have escaped the worst case scenario. He is focusing, though, really focusing in on our supply management for dairy. And that's been a long-standing thorn in the side of the U.S. But it's unclear at this point what is planned for the auto industry other than the 25% tariffs that are coming on tonight. So I guess that goes back to the original that he had planned for back in February or late January, right. whenever they were first announced. So 25% there. And if you had the opportunity to watch it, you would have noticed that there were a lot of auto workers union people present in the audience for this announcement, and he kept referring to them. And at one point, he even referred to the fact that most of them had voted Democrat in the past, but not this time.
Yeah, he had to bring that up.
Yeah, and he thanked them for it. So what we are doing right now is, and it seems that there's a 10% general tariff that he's imposing across the board, but now how that impacts Canada, not sure yet. We're waiting for a comment from Prime Minister Carney to figure out what's going on there. Now, on top of all of this, Eddie, this week, there has been a new twist that has been added to the scenario. And that is the document that he actually referred to in his speech in the Rose Garden this afternoon. It was a document that outlines the real pain points in doing trade with countries around the world. 350 pages worth. In that document that was released by the U.S. earlier this week, it says Quebec's language law is considered a trade barrier. Now, as expected, the response here in La Belle Province was swift.
We won't change our law. We won't change our rules.
And so he was asked for a little bit of clarification overall.
I had some discussion with the consulaire of the United States since fall. And of course, they were concerned about those new rules. But they didn't make the point that it's really a huge question. Yeah, they have some concerns. And when you see the document made public today, I think it's 300 pages of concerns. So we don't have to change our law to accommodate United States and French language.
And of course, Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet was swift and not impressed.
The United States would not dare ask any nation on earth to sacrifice their language if they want to deal with United States. But it's easy for Mr. Trump to say, too bad for French, because quite often Canada does the same. but he wouldn't dare do that against Germans and French and Italians. So Quebecers have to stand up and say that's the end to it. We'll place our trust into Quebecers. And let's make it clear, Quebecers have the capability to say, without Quebec approval, no deal. They know what to do if they want that.
Pretty firm.
Very much so, and the French language minister, the provincial French language minister, really just brushing it aside completely. You know, and there's no question they've been in conversations with the U.S. officials since this time last year, maybe even longer than a year, because there's concerns too about some of the signage on the outsides of stores, for example. You know,
Right.
you're taking like Home Depot and some of those stores, and you know, making sure that there is the French translation is much larger than the English translation on the building, on or on any signage that may be outside of the building. So there's a lot going on there, and I'm not sure. Like I'd love to see the president sit down with these guys and have a meaningful exchange of dialogue across the table. I'd pay for admission to watch that conversation.
Yeah.
So now, this all happens as there was a change in the dynamic as far as the president's respect or lack of respect for our country. And at the time, of course, Justin Trudeau, when he was prime minister. And it all started last week when Mark Carney stood up and said, you know, it's not us, it's you. We're breaking up.
The old relationship we had with the United States, based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperations, is over. What exactly the United States does next is unclear. But what is clear is that we, as Canadians, have agency. We have power. We are masters in our own home. Nous sommes maîtres chez nous. We can control our destiny. We can give ourselves much more than any foreign government, including the United States, can ever take away.
We moved on, and after Carney made that statement, all of a sudden, a call came in that evening from the White House, and setting up a call last Friday morning with Trump. And following the call, this is what the president had to say about how it went.
We had a very good conversation. Mark called me today at 10 o'clock. We put out a statement. We had a very, very good talk. He's going through an election now, and we'll see what happens. But we have Liberation Day, as you know, on April 2nd, because, and I'm not referring to Canada, but many countries have taken advantage of us, the likes of which nobody even thought was possible for many, many decades, And, you know, that has to stop. We're going to end up with a very good relationship with Canada and a lot of the other countries. Some we probably won't. It won't be so pleasant. But I think most countries are agreeing with me. They actually, many of them have actually apologized. They said, look, we have taken advantage. But we had a very good talk, the Prime Minister and myself, and I think things are going to work out very well between Canada and the United States.
So that was a complete 180 as far as tone is concerned
Yeah.
and level of respect.
We can
And
speculate all we want. I mean, there could be a lot of reasons behind, but behind that. But Gary, 100%, his tone completely changed, 180 degrees from the usual rhetoric we get from him.
that's
We
right.
can just speculate what was said on that phone call.
I'd love to know, but here we go with the Prime Minister's response as well, because he was at an event, I think it was here in Montreal, if I'm not mistaken, and he was asked by reporters about the call, and this is what he had to say about it.
It was, as I say, it was a very, very productive. His words very productive, mine very constructive. They mean the same thing. It was a very cordial, substantive call. Look, this was a call between two leaders.
Sorry about that. The finger, heavy finger again. Anyway, but essentially he said the same thing that Trump said, and that was it. So there was a great change in the overall tone. Now, I detected from Carney that he's not backing down. He's still very businesslike in his approach to this, and rightly so. And that's where he comes from. But he's demanding respect, and
Absolutely.
and he is getting it from Trump. So where it goes from here, I'm not sure. However, getting into the weeds of what Trump announced today, it still sounds like we didn't get hit all that badly over the widespread of it all. But the question is, how much longer does this go on?
Well, you know what? You're absolutely right. This can drag on for months and months and months. Part of Trump's strategies are always keep your opponent guessing, and he's doing exactly that. He'll continue keeping us guessing. It's part of the deal, I guess, in trying to sustain an upper hand. But I was going back to Mr. Carney's opposition and being very firm with Donald Trump and the United States that the good old ways and the good old days of doing business with the United States is essentially over. And I guess to answer your question, what do we do from this point forward with the continued uncertainty? I think that Mr. Carney, if I was his advisor, I'd say carry the course, continue with our negotiations with other countries in terms of improving our joint economies by trade, by free trade. We're talking about the EU, we're talking about Asia Pac, we're talking about the Australians, we're talking about any other country that are raising their hands and want to continue to do business with us because we are a trustworthy customer. And let's call a spade a spade. The other organizations are also trusty countries you can shake hands with and have an agreement and sign any sort of documentation that enables a free trade. That day is completely gone with the United States of America, or at least until Donald Trump no longer occupies that office. I would highly suggest, and as a Canadian, I would encourage Prime Minister Carney, hold the course, keep on going, negotiate with Europeans. Let's excise ourselves of the United States for our own benefit and the benefit of our true allies, which basically lie in Europe and the rest of the world, apart from the dictator states. You know who those are, and the United States of America, which unfortunately is venturing off to that categorization. So for me, stay the course.
Oh, absolutely. I think that this has been a lesson, and hopefully it is a lesson learned. There seems to be the momentum is still there to remove the interprovincial trade barriers. And Carney has already come out and said that the goal is from the federal level is to remove pretty much all of the federal trade barriers across the country by July 1st, Canada Day.
Right.
And the other, the provinces are stepping up and they are talking. Hopefully they don't get bogged down in some of the bureaucracy again that, have derailed these efforts in the past. And there should be a set national standard, period. We're a country. There should be a set national standard for things, as far as moving things back and forth from coast to coast to coast, from the educational standpoint, our healthcare standpoint. It's a mishmash of levels of quality of service, and tires on trucks have to be a certain size in one province, but a smaller size or a larger size in a different province. Like, why?
Yeah.
They're putting down the same asphalt and cement right across the country. I don't get some of this foolishness that has crept into the other than it's someone justifying their position somewhere. But we need to diversify. But here's the thing. After watching how quiet our European allies have been when the Oval Office first singled us out and really came at us hard.
Right.
And there was, I didn't feel like any of them stood up for us. And yes, the argument is, well, they were concerned because they didn't want to draw his anger in their direction and all of a sudden have tariffs dumped on them. Well, it doesn't take a mental giant to figure it out that they were going to get tariffed one way or the other sooner rather than later anyway. But the fact of the matter is, again, we were just kind of left all alone to deal with it on our own without any words of support. So when we're dealing with them and opening up, and we need to diversify our trade routes now. There's no question we need to diversify, but we also have to always sleep with one eye open when we're dealing with anyone outside of our borders.
Yeah.
That's a hard lesson to learn because, as a nation, we're pretty friendly, easygoing, trusting bunch. Well, the geopolitical climate has changed, and it's changed abruptly just even since January 26th.
Yeah.
And so we have to change with it.
Didn't, if memory serves, Gary, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't the Danish parliament voice support for us? As well as Macron from France. I believe those are the only two that went on public to actually say something in support of us. But you're right. Predominantly, the rest of Europe was pretty quiet about it.
Yeah. And then we have the whole thing with the monarchy. And you have a king who never said a word because the monarchy doesn't get involved in things like that. Well, what the hell does the monarchy get involved in? Like
horse poop, exactly.
Yeah. What good are you to us?
Hey, you're on my money. You got to be able to say something for us, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But so I hope we have learned, and it's a tough lesson to learn, and it's not over. And unfortunately, people are going to be hurt. People are going to be hurt financially. Their families are going to be hurt. You're going to have probably some families breaking up because of all of this. It's a hard road that we're going to be traveling over the next number of months.
And interestingly enough, I know you're referring to Canadian families, but this is also going to be quite devastating to American families as well. I mean, I wish well to everyone, and you and I are concerned about Canada right now, but, by the same token, there are going to be families and people directly affected by the trade war that Trump has imposed on us and the rest of the world. I mean, he's waging economic warfare, whichever way you slice it, right?
Mm-hmm. Deborah says from our comments, the only country that has taken advantage of other countries is the U.S. Always have, always will. And by the way, if you have some thoughts on what we're talking about tonight, whether it's tariffs in the Oval Office or the election or later on legacy blemished, by all means, get in on the conversation now. We want to hear from you, and let's get out there and really have a good discussion about this evening. All right. Today, Polyev and Singh both were talking tariffs and the impact on Canada. It has taken over our election campaign, really. And well, actually, it's kidnapped it, really, when you think about it, because that's the first thing that everyone is addressing. And I think I have a couple of clips from today. And let's see now. Yeah. This was this morning, Pierre Polyev. I believe he was in Toronto. And this is what he had to say.
One is to immediately retaliate with targeted tariffs against the Americans that will maximize impact on them while minimizing it on us, all while we give liquidity to businesses to keep their workers working. Two, work to bring, after the election, a rapid end to this dispute by concluding an economic and security deal that protects our independence and sovereignty, gives us tariff-free access, and allows us to rebuild our military so that the Americans can have confidence that we are carrying our own weight. And then three, of course, the most important part is to build an economic fortress here in Canada. After the lost Liberal decade of rising costs and crime and a falling economy under America's thumb, we can't afford to give them a fourth term. We need to put Canada first for a change.
And Singh was, I'm not sure where Singh was now, it just escapes me, but he was on the move today. And of course, tariffs on his mind as well.
So the first thing we got to do to make sure that we weather this storm is by protecting workers. So if a worker is impacted, if you're in a trade sensitive sector where tariffs are going to impact you, you need to know that we've got your back. So New Democrats are going to make sure that EI covers enough of your salary so you can keep your home, you can pay your bills, that we've got your back. That's my commitment to you. We also need to build a strong economy in our own country. We can't control what Donald Trump's doing. We're going to fight back and defend our country, but we also have to invest in our country. And that means investing in our workers. Let's invest in creating good jobs here in Canada, using Canadian content, Canadian workers to build the infrastructure we need. If we're going to build roads, bridges, homes, let's use Canadian content and Canadian workers, and let's favor unionized workers in all those projects.
And of course, Carney was in Ottawa doing prime minister type things, preparing for the announcement today and meeting with the advisors and everything as to what our response would be once they found out what Trump was talking about. The whole thing of it is, Eddie, like, you're right. It's not only affecting or will affect people on this side of the border, it's already now starting to be felt on the other side of the border, and there are some people of groups of the MAGA supporters who are now starting to jump ship.
Yes,
going public as they jump ship. You know, they fooled around and found out. Faithful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I listened to what Mr. Polyev said on your clip and what Mr. Singh said on the clip. And interestingly enough, you know, just by listening to the two of them, they're obviously in campaign mode. I found that Singh spoke to people during his speech, okay? and I found that Poiliev spoke into a camera just the way they talked about it. There was a totally different level of passionate communication between the two. So, thumbs up to Mr. Singh on that. And you know what? At the end of the day, we talked about this in a few episodes. This election, the prime focus, prime focus will be at first for all our candidates to deal with the Trump ballot box issue. If they ignore that, they're history. They have to. The last poll I saw of potential voters, it basically said that 39% of respondents said the important question in this election is who is the best to deal with US President Donald Trump. So by de facto, because of that, our candidates for the seat of the prime minister moving forward after the end of this month, they have to spend a tremendous amount of energy to convince Canadians that they're the right people to defend Canada on all levels. I'm not just talking about the economy and finances, on all levels against Trump and the regime that he's forming down there, the United States of America. They win that component of it. That's 40% to 45% of the way there in terms of securing a vote. And it's unfortunate, then we start to deal with all the other issues in Canada that we have to contend with. But that's just the nature of the beast today. You know what? And I would not be surprised if, some of the elections that are going to be ongoing in some of the jurisdictions out in Europe, once Trump accelerates his tariffs on European countries, if that may or may not become an issue in their elections. Probably not so much because they're not stuck with that neighbor down south of us because we share a border with the United States. But you know what? It might become an issue at some point in terms of how gravely a European country's economy is going to be impacted as Trump pushes more aggressively on his tariffs. So yeah, it has to be at least here in Canada. It definitely is 38 to 40% of concern for Canadian voters, and all three of them are going to continue to have to push it. And Mr. Carney definitely has been on the upper hand because he is making the decisions in terms of what are we doing with Trump right now, even though I'm in the middle of a campaign. So, good on all three candidates for expressing their views, and good on Mr. Carney, Prime Minister Carney, in putting his foot down against Trump right now.
Monel writes, meaning of megalomaniac, someone who has an unnaturally strong wish for power and control, or thinks they are much, much more important and powerful than they really are. Well, I've worked with a few people like that. Seriously. Yeah. And you know what? That is so true. He is the walking, talking, breathing definition. Definitely. Mm-hmm. No doubt about it whatsoever.
Yeah.
So, how much longer do you think we're going to wait until we see a major uprising in the U.S.? Now, I know there's a big national protest march planned
on the 5th, I think.
Yeah, Saturday. Yeah. And I think there are some marches here in Canada as well in support. And there have been a lot of these marches across the country. They don't seem to be making or getting a lot of coverage in the mainstream media at the moment, and I'm not sure why. I'll pick up a piece here or there along the way, but
right.
Not in the same manner that you would expect that they would be getting more coverage. Now maybe this weekend will change it.
It seems to me more in the mainstream media. The coverage is more specific to Tesla dealerships being torched, damaged, ransacked, and whatnot. Now, I don't know if that's the type of news in terms of, hey, there's something major happening here. Somebody got hurt, somebody got shot, some cars are getting burned up. Let's get the camera crews out there. As opposed, does that not give them the viewership impact they're looking for compared to peaceful protests in front of a state building? I really don't know, but I think you're absolutely right. The mainstream media right now just seems to be focused on dealerships and personal property, Tesla vehicles being set on fire and damaged. And that's on mainstream media. Now, for looking at state-controlled media, being Fox in the United States, what they're going to focus on is the bad people that are doing all this to Elon Musk and poor Elon Musk type of thing. So, they're equally never going to focus on any sort of public demonstrations that are geared towards Donald Trump and his government. I hope that this coming Saturday that enough people come out and demonstrate and protest that actually justifies mainstream media for covering it. And to tell you the truth, I think it would be an absolute travesty to the credibility of mainstream media above and beyond Fox. I'm talking about your ABCs, your NBCs, your CBSs, your CNNs. If they don't actually provide some decent coverage of what's going on in the country, then I think that the quality and the honesty of the media in the United States, you might as well throw them in the same basket as Fox News, because if they don't report what's actually going on in this country, who will? Fox won't. So yeah, I'm a little worried about that actually, and I hope both you and I are wrong about the media, that we're missing coverage. I really hope that's the case, but I guess we're going to see on the 5th, on the 6th of April, on how much attention the media is going to be putting on these demonstrations.
And there are other things happening too. Well, actually, there was an issue yesterday, an election of a judge in one of the red states, and Musk went in with money and he was giving away $1 million.
$1 million, yes.
Yeah. Anyway, the Republican lost, the Democrat judge won.
Isn't that against the law?
Which? Offering money?
Yeah. I mean, seriously speaking, that is so flagrant, it's not even funny.
Well, he did it as kind of a contest, almost like a lottery sort of thing. So I don't know, like it's
semantics,
a gray area. And guess what? He's the unelected president. What does he care?
Oh, you got a point there.
Who's going to arrest him? Who's going to charge him? You have a felon sitting in the White House and behind the Resolute desk in the big chair. So what's going out and offering $1 million bribe for some votes? Really? And then the other side of it is, in the last week to 10 days, a lot of stories about traveling to the U.S., crossing the border, Canadians crossing the border, and more there's advice coming about, if you're going to, the best thing to do is just get yourself a burner phone and take that with you and leave your regular phone at home, and don't sign into anything on the burner phone.
Right.
Because they just grab the phones and away they go. And there have been at least 2 cases I've heard of in New Brunswick, not verified, but given where I heard about them, I don't have any reason to believe that they're not true. And that is where border communities, so they're used to just going back and forth to get their milk and their gas and different things. Anyway, they've been stopped, and they'd have their passport and that, and then the border guard would ask them, "What do you think of our president?"
Yeah. Wow.
2 people, and one person in particular, an older man who's been going across the border since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. He said, "I was honest. I told him what I thought. Guess what? You turn, back you go."
Yeah.
And another, there have been some other instances like that as well, including some people being flagged and being told, do your trip this time, but don't come back.
Yeah.
So there's a change really going on there, and if we're not wanted, that's fine. Most of us don't want to go there anyway.
Anymore,
Yeah, exactly. So uh, it's it's unnerving to see some of what's taking place from that perspective, and how some people are being grabbed off the street by ICE,
Mm-hmm.
and they apologized to somebody the other day because there was a mix. They called it an administrative error.
Mm-hmm.
The guy was legit, totally legit. And they grabbed him and hauled him off, put him in a detention center, and I think he was there for a couple of days, and they finally got things straightened out. Like it's no different than going to some of the smaller islands in the Caribbean,
Mm-hmm.
and you know how you can very quickly run into an issue there for whatever the reason,
Yeah.
and you know you're stuck.
Gary,
So
in your recollection, in your memory, when was the last time, apart from a major nature events like a hurricane or an earthquake or anything like that, when was the last time that you recall that there was a travel advisory issued by Canada to their citizens about travel to the United States? Think. I bet you'd be hard pressed. When was the last time
the
they said, do not travel to the United States because of blah, 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 ABCD?
I think, Eddie, the closest thing you might come to it would be the advisories during the height of the pandemic.
Okay,
You know, but that was a blanket advisory, not only for the United States, but even traveling between provinces.
correct. What I'm talking about is
But
specifically
yeah,
traveling to the
yeah,
United States during
I
peacetime.
yeah.
There is no natural phenomenon or weather disaster going on. There's no pandemic going on. When was the last time Canada said, guys, we really suggest you not go down there?
Yeah, I don't ever
No.
remember that.
Yeah.
And I
That says
remember
a
in
lot.
yeah, I remember in the 80s, we would be going down at least every other weekend, sometimes just as far as Bangor, which was, you know, a 3 hour drive
Hmm.
down, 3 hour drive back. Just go down and for the day, or have, you know, dinner and maybe pick up some groceries. And then every other, you know, other weeks in between, we would go to Portland, which
Hmm.
was a little farther down in the state of Maine, and spend the weekend. And it was just, you know, it was just back and forth.
Yeah.
No problems. Even, you know, not so much on the U.S. side, but on the Canadian side, some of the border guards kind of, you know, became familiar,
Hmm.
and so you know, you had a much better rapport with them. But yeah, no, and yeah,
That's sad.
it's
That's
it
really
is sad.
unfortunate, you know. I mean, I seen. I was looking at something earlier this week on a podcast where they were speaking to border town counties and small cities, especially along the New York Vermont border into Canada, and they're already feeling the strain. Some of them are actually saying they're not even sure they're going to be able to survive another 3 months without the traffic coming across the border for a variety of things: cheap gas, clothing, in some cases, groceries, or coming down just to tour. Burlington, Vermont is struggling, absolutely struggling. They're completely dependent on tourist dollars from Canada.
Yep. Old
So,
Orchard Beach in Maine,
Old Orchard
lot.
Beach in Maine. Yeah, there was another piece that basically said that bookings for this summer, as a result, they were fully booked before all this happened. Bookings for the summer, they've had up to 65% cancellation in the hotel industry in Old Orchard and an entire area. That is business killing. You know what? And all the Republican pundits, basically saying, "Oh, well, you know what? There is going to be a little pain at the beginning before we actually jump ahead, and everybody's going to benefit from everything we're doing right now." Well, that's easily said from your $100 million mansion while you're driving around in your Lamborghini. Very easily said. But the poor guy trying to make an honest living in the United States is going to be drastically affected by this. And you know what? Vice versa. I'm sure in retaliation, there are a lot of Americans who are not going to come into Canada for retaliatory reasons. So everybody's going to suffer as a result of what they're trying to do. And you know what? At the end of the day, Gary, we're going to have to wait and see what the gains are going to be from this. I don't see any. I don't think you see any. And I don't think our world leaders don't see any value to this. So, yeah.
Well, I was reading an article last night, and a number of suppliers in the U.S. are saying that they're Canadian customers because of the Buy Canadian, and they're refocusing, sourcing Canadian products in Canada, and that orders have been cut in half. The U.S. suppliers are really now just beginning to feel the effects of the consumer boycott here in Canada, and
Right.
so as you know, in the next month, that's going to become even more so. There are a couple of U.S. companies that were planning on expanding to Canada this year, and that's on hold. And one company, and it sounds like it's a smaller company, and they make diaper products for young kids.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, they were at the point that they were just finalizing the French wording for their product.
No
And
kidding.
they had to put it all on hold. So they've invested some money just in their packaging already. And they had to put that on hold because they realized that there's not going to be a market for it.
Market for it, right? Wow.
Yeah. So, it's taking hold, and more people are becoming much more conscious of it. And that Facebook group that you pointed out to me, I was looking at it last night, and people are still sort of struggling with the whole thing around, well, do I buy at Costco or do I buy at Walmart?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's a gray area, but the fact of the matter is they have offices and distribution facilities here in Canada, and they employ Canadians in this country, from their offices and distribution centers right through to the stores. And they're also making efforts now to try and source more Canadian produced.
Canadian goods. Yeah.
Yeah. So, if you try and cut them off completely as well, then we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot to a degree, because all of a sudden we have more Canadians out of a job
Mm-hmm.
and looking. So, that's a gray area, but we're scoring a success. I would suggest we are scoring a success in the fact that we're making them much more aware of we're not going to be fooled with, and that they have to start really bending over to find Canadian product to fill their shelves with.
Right.
That's a plus.
Yes, it is.
That is a plus. I would think, that's how I see it. Anyway, so we've got all of that taking place, and I think, you know what? By the holiday weekend in May, the Memorial Day weekend in May in the States, that could take on a much different look than what it has in previous years, because
Mm-hmm.
it's starting to build, and you're going to see that there are more people down there all of a sudden out of work, because the suppliers aren't pushing the merchandise out to Canada. They're being cut off. So I would think by Memorial Day weekend it's going to be kind of messy in the U.S., and the president and his gang may find the heat, being turned up big time.
Well, I mean, certainly, certainly the local Republican representatives, in a lot of cities, I mean, you're looking at the town halls; they're turning into an absolute circus. You know what? State-controlled media is basically going to run it off as, these are just paid liberal actors coming in to disrupt a town hall. Hell no. I mean, just about everybody in there is just completely up in arms on a variety of issues. And then you'll have the Republican representative lie to people right in their faces through the microphone and look them right in the eyes. And some of the people that are in these town halls are just getting up and absolutely leaving. I saw one example of a town hall where the Republican representative decided not to show up. Well, everybody showed up anyway and had their own town hall and just aired their grievances to each other as a show of support amongst each other that what's going on is wrong. So, you know what? The pressure has to get up to the upper echelons of the Republican government, and some of the senior officials in the government, have to start listening to their constituents. The sad part about this, we have House elections coming up in a year and a half, 2 years. That's a long wait. A lot of damage could be done, let alone an election in 4 years from now. So, a lot of unhappy people, and I'm surprised to see that much unhappiness amongst the MAGA supporters. Equally, I'm happy to see that they've realized that there's a lot of them are realizing what have we done and being verbal about it. I guess the rest of the world is only hoping that more and more of the base that Donald Trump relies on are going to be coming to their senses. And how it happens, Gary? You're absolutely right. When they start losing their jobs.
Yeah.
Right. Which is unfortunate. I don't wish any ill on anybody on planet Earth, but you know what? It's almost like you asked for it, but you hope that people are not going to lose their jobs, but you and I both know they will. So hopefully that's going to send a clear-cut message to the government.
Right. Monel writes, mainstream media won't cover these things anymore. That's why all of a sudden there's so many more podcast people are speaking up for themselves and putting this on YouTube. A lot more podcasts and YouTube channels popping up now, and very legitimate channels. Really legitimate channels. Now, just before we leave this, I had the opportunity to, thanks to you mentioning it, and I went looking for it and found it. He's now a former MP because he's not reoffering, but he's been in the House of Commons 20-some years, as a New Democratic member of Parliament. And I'm referring to Charlie Angus. He has shown up on a number of podcasts and YouTube channels that I tend to drop in on from time to time, US-based channels. And Charlie is quite the speaker, and he pulls no punches. And a week ago, they had an Elbows Up rally in Toronto, and he was speaking at this rally. And I just grabbed a couple of quick clips of it, and I think probably this would be a good way to wrap up this segment regarding tariffs and the United States and where it's going. So
thanks for putting him up. I'm really happy with that.
Here we go.
What we're facing, my friends, is an existential threat to who we are as a people. And I was just in Europe at the NATO meetings. I went there hoping that I was going to be reassured. Big cousin Germany was going to say, hey, Donald, Canadians are our allies. I thought our friends in France would say, you're a NATO country, we'll be there. And I thought the United Kingdom, all the people we sent over to save them, and none of them stood up. And I realized we were alone. Nobody was coming to save us. But I also realized then, when we were 11 million people, we came and saved you. and we will save democracy again, because if it's a dirty, rotten job and nobody else wants to stand up for it, they always gave it to Canadians in the war. Give it to us now. We will defend democracy right now. Because I'm not going to sugarcoat this. This is a fundamental existential threat right now. Donald Trump thought we would roll over. If we don't roll over, he's going to get angrier. If we stand up to him, it's either going to be us or them. But they are divided, and they are angry, and they're fearful, and they're fighting amongst themselves. And we, as Canada, we are Team Canada. I will take those odds any day of the week, any day. And we're freaking them out. What did Pete Navarro say the other day? Oh, come on, Canada, stop with all that hockey stuff. Like, you're scaring us. You're scaring us? We haven't even got over the ice yet. Wait till you see the bench clearing brawl. Yeah, we are going to have to be tough. We're going to have to be mean, because we're going to defend that border of decency. We will always defend it. We will never give an inch. We will never bend. We will never break. We will never kiss that gangster's ring, because we are true, we are North, we are strong, and we are free, and we are elbows up right now, all the time. Elbows up, elbows up, elbows up. Thank you. That's who we are. Thank you so much. Thank you. Elbows up, elbows up, elbows up, elbows up.
Inspirational.
Yeah, he's a great speaker, and I've watched a couple of interviews that he has done with U.S. Channels, podcasters, and such. And man, oh man, you just kind of get up away from the TV, and you can just feel your heart beating in your chest, and the pride.
Yeah.
And watching him and what he has, what he's giving, every inch of his body is into what he is saying and his message.
Yeah.
And he's traveling across the country right now. Tonight he's in Sudbury, and he mentioned there about going out west this week. So yeah, it's too bad. And apparently I forgot that he had run for the leadership, the NDP leadership, when Singh
Oh, I
won.
didn't know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
he pulled about 19% of the vote at the time. But he, even watching him during question period and those comments from time to time, just a very passionate individual in speaking. So anyway, so I think that's a great way to wind up our session on tariffs tonight, and that's elbows up.
Elbows up.
Forget it. Coming up later, the great one, has his legacy been blemished? If you are enjoying our stream, well, you can help to support us. Just a like or share, and remember to comment and subscribe. And if you do, that's going to really help our channel. And if you're watching after the fact, by all means, leave a comment down below. We've been getting a lot of comments after, from people watching on the weekend, and I've responded to all of them. I don't think I've missed any, and if I did, I apologize. But I checked yesterday, and everybody was up to date. I had responded in some way to your comments, so thank you for that. So remember to like and share, support us, subscribe, and Eddie and I thank you for that, because our channel is growing slowly but surely, and we are quite enjoying the way that it is growing overall. So let's move on, and we are into week 2 of the federal election campaign. And again this week, of course, the U.S. trade war is sucking most of the oxygen out of the campaign. Earlier today, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre laid out his plan for offsetting the trade war, which we played back in the first segment. It was a 3-point plan. And then beyond that, New Democrat leader Jagmeet Singh was also dealing with the tariffs issue, which we also played because it just seemed to fit into that point at the time. Now, Liberal leader Mark Carney has been off the campaign trail, dealing with the response to the latest round of tariffs. Meantime, and this has been quite a week, Eddie. Meantime, a few candidates have fallen by the wayside. The Liberals lost one earlier this week over comments he made, while the Conservatives have lost not one, not two, but 3 candidates within about a 24-hour period.
I was only aware of one.
Oh, so was I initially, and all of a sudden just boom, boom. Yeah, okay. And it's all for remarks and sharing of comments on social media platforms. And it was just like, wow. Carney has rolled out a commitment to a major housing program, much the same as back in the early to mid 50s, when they did what became known as wartime houses right across the country. Little 2-story bungalow type houses. Anyway, he has a plan that he's rolled out related to housing. Poilievre has committed to a 6-step plan, energy development plan, including west to east pipelines, and Singh is pledging to protecting our universal health care system. And it's really hard at times to tell the difference, especially between the Conservatives and the Liberals, as far as their promises, because it's almost like the 2 platforms are in sync in the way they're rolling out.
They are.
But and full marks to Carney. He's off the campaign trail, which the second time since the campaign has started in 2 weeks that he's taken a day or a couple of days out to deal with prime ministerial duties. Now, I caught some comments last night or early this morning. There was a panel discussion in Toronto earlier this week, and former Conservative, Harper Conservative Cabinet Minister Lisa Raitt was on the panel, and so was former New Brunswick Premier and Ambassador to the U.S., Frank McKenna. It was really, McKenna's comments I found interesting about both Poilievre and Carney. And he was saying about Carney certainly can carry off and is looking very prime ministerial. However, if the questioning, when he's taking questions from the media, hits a political note, he said you can see where the lack of experience, political experience, is there. He said, that will come in time, I guess, but it could be a bit of a drawback for him if he becomes prime minister and he's in the House, or if he's on the opposite side of the House, if the Conservatives win the election and he's an opposition leader. Frank McKenna was saying that he's going to be a while growing into that side of it. And probably, because he's been in very high positions within government, at arm's length, but still, answering to the upper level of politicians and executive staff members. Very used to being the diplomat and not so much, coming out and hitting hard.
Mm-hmm.
I sense he didn't actually say this as far as Poilievre, on the prime minister side. What he did say was that Poilievre is and has been a very effective opposition leader, and it is true, he has been. There's no doubt in my mind that is true. I don't know how he would. He has to let go of some of that pit bull with a bone kind of approach
Right. Mm-hmm.
as a prime minister. So that would probably be a very hard transition for Poilievre. But I just found those interesting observations. Certainly,
Yeah.
watching Carney the other day, he did look very prime ministerial. And anytime he's mentioned about talking to Trump, he laid out exactly how, what the conditions were to have that discussion.
Yeah.
But in a firm, but yet a diplomatic manner.
Right. I mean, yeah, he's not a. I mean, we all know he's not a seasoned politician. But by the same token, you look at Trudeau, former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. When he first took office, I think his exposure to politics was pretty minimal. I mean, he was an educator by profession, a drama teacher, if I'm not mistaken. I forget what institution, but he came in green as you can imagine, and he developed a finesse in terms of dealing with question period while he was in house. It's a learned trait, if you want to put it. I have every confidence that that Prime Minister Carney, once reelected, will be able to handle himself. You know what? It's going to be a learning curve for him, but I think he's going to handle himself quite eloquently, whether he's Prime Minister of Canada or whether he's leader of the opposition. I think in both cases he's going to be a force to be reckoned with. Just look at what he's done since he's taken over the reins of the Liberal Party and interim Prime Minister. I quite honestly think that I understand most of his focus has been on Trump, as it should be. He's done a pretty good job with it. And look, he's fighting against a big hitter, being Donald Trump, and he's holding his ground. So that's political bonus points, no matter which way you slice it. If he becomes the prime minister, regardless if he becomes prime minister or the leader of the opposition, he's going to do a great job, I think, in both cases. And like I said, it's something you learn. And as you mentioned, being the governor of the Bank of Canada, the Bank of England, you're dealing with a lot of political heavyweights, although maybe not on the open floor like you would in either parliament. He has some experience he can leverage himself on. I think he'll be okay.
What does it say about the party? And I should go back a little bit, talking about these three candidates, conservative candidates. Less than 24 hours. Poilievre and the Conservatives have been preparing for an election for at least 2 years.
Right.
And they apparently had the most number of candidates ready, whether appointed or by nomination. A lot of appointments, I believe. Anyway, what does it say about the party and the organization when you have three candidates that go down in flames that quickly, why weren't these candidates vetted?
Correct.
What happened there? And if that's the way you're running your party, is that any way to run a country?
Yeah, that's certainly a blemish on anybody's resume.
Yeah. You know, I don't get it, Eddie. Like, it, you know, even the Liberal candidate, there had to be signs beyond like what he actually ended up resigning over in comment that he made. There had to be some signs there. And again, the vetting process. Were they vetted? Like, or did just grab the name and go? Like that's what it looks like. One of the conservative candidates, when they started doing some digging on the social media platforms, that's where they found some of his comments from a couple of years ago.
Right.
You know, come on, folks. That's one of the first places you go now when you're doing any kind of a hiring process. Like, what are they up to on the social media platforms, and what's back? How far back? You know, what's in the past? Whether they realized they were going in that direction, saying what they were saying, and you know, like, and or thinking, oh, it's only social media. What does it matter? It matters a whole lot.
Everything matters nowadays.
Yeah.
Everything, everywhere, everyone's watching, everything is watching, and everything is listening, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there are cameras everywhere. I mean, you know, there it is. They're everywhere. You never, ever know. You can't let your guard down. But I was really extremely surprised that first a Liberal and then a Conservative, and then all of a sudden, bang, bang, two more Conservatives. And again, I ask, what does it say about the party's ability, if they can't run a nomination process, can they run a country?
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Yeah, but I think it's a very, very valid thought. I mean, look, I mean, in Canada, we have elected officials, and elected officials get nominated to front bench and back bench positions, right? Not like the United States, where your plumber next door can basically run the defense program of the United States, right? I mean, of course, you have to be a billionaire, but anyway, we don't do things like that here in Canada. So, what happened to the vetting process? It used to be so important, so critical, you know, the political party spent a lot of money and a lot of resources over years and months to prepare their candidates, to vet their candidates, to make sure that they've got the proper representation in their constituency, right? And to have a total of 4 candidates, basically, you know, between Liberals and the Conservatives, mostly Conservatives, have to bow out and hand in their resignations from the campaign. I don't think in the history of our elections we've seen anything like this before. Or is it because of the fact that everyone's watching, everyone's listening, everyone's paying attention, is just so much more elevated today than it was years ago? You know, with the days of Gretzky and the days of Harper and the days of Mulrooney and in those days, right? You know, maybe we did have elected officials that said things, but there was really no way of actually capturing what they had said. Nowadays, it doesn't work that way anymore, because one false move, boom, somebody's going to pounce on it and throw it in your face. And you know what? Worst case scenario, these people, like, let's say, for example, these individuals were not found out now, but found out later after they've been elected and put into place in the government. The hell that would be paid in terms of question period and questions about credibility of people that are actually ministers on the front bench. You know, as opposed to focusing on issues for Canada, what ends up happening is the floor is actually occupied during question periods, questioning the credibility of candidates because something happened years ago. So a lot of consequences to this, and you're absolutely right. The vetting process should not be thrown away for the sake of efficiency, in my
All
opinion,
right.
anyway.
And in the latest polls that I saw, Nanos research today, and I think Leger is kind of mirroring it, but the Liberals are maintaining about an 8-point lead over the Conservatives. And Carney is the favorite as far as leader is concerned, as far as prime minister is concerned. There's a wide gap between Carney and Poilievre. And then the NDP actually have come out of, remember there was a poll last week that had them in single digit territory?
Right.
Well, they're just out of single digit territory. But Singh's popularity is sinking, and so that's where it sits. And now Nanos is doing they call it a 3-day rolling average, and I think they're releasing the results every evening or first thing in the morning.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So anyhow, you can see where it's going, and watching Poilievre and. I don't know. I detect he's been fighting a cold big time. Like he's been coughing and really struggling during some of his speeches. And I feel for the guy. I know what he's going through. But overall, even before you noticed that he was coming down with the cold, there was a certain look in his face that sort of the confident look, the little bit of cockiness with it.
The swagger.
It's
not there.
To be there.
No,
didn't seem to be there. And one thing they are doing is they have his wife with him, pretty much on every event, and they've had their children with them a few times as well. But every event, she's there, and she's right into the crowd and shaking hands and everything. So they've had some large rallies. However, there was one in Fredericton, and the people in New Brunswick, the Conservatives were playing up about, oh, look at the large rally we had, blah, blah. And they had a fair amount of people there, but much to the dismay of one person I was speaking with, I said, well, they probably bussed in half of the Conservatives in the upper St. John River Valley. And, and from...
and made a crowd out of it.
Yeah, southern New Brunswick, and had a smaller venue. I mean, that's the trick. You book a small venue, and then you pile in as many people as you can, so it's overflowing. Look at this crowd that we have. Right. Anyhow, so the tide has turned, and I don't know. I don't know if Poilievre and the Conservatives can now ease the slippage, and maybe this is going to put even more importance on the debates. Normally, debates don't have a whole lot of influence with people. But it's going to be interesting to see. The one thing I have noticed in the polls, those supporting the Liberal are their solid support is lower than the Conservatives. The Conservatives, if say and I'm just going to pull a figure out of the air. Say the Conservatives have I don't know. 37% support. When you get into it, 60% of the people in that 37%, they're solid. Whereas the Liberals, their solid support is a little softer than what the Conservatives are. So.
Look, what do we got? We have 3 weeks to election, something like that?
Yep, and the advanced polls will be opening soon.
Okay.
And, one person pointed out yesterday that those who are solid will get out and vote early and get it over with.
Right.
So yeah, it's going to be interesting in the debates. I think the
Well,
debates will play.
I think debates are going to be very important. You're right. You know, it's like, oh, another debate. I think this one's going to be extremely important because a lot of people are vested in terms of what's going on in the world today. You know, from new voters, younger generation. There seems to be more interest based on what I've seen on social media, and of course, you know, us folks who've been professionals for a long time, and the guy who's been working for a long time. This is extremely important to all Canadians, and it was, as we said at the beginning of the show, it's becoming an election that's Trump heavy. You know, we want to know how are we going to be dealing with the United States moving forward. And of course, the economy is always in the forefront of questions on Canadians' tongues, you know, and the economy broken down to housing affordability, the cost of groceries, and on and on and on. And I think it behooves the Liberal Party, PC, and NDP to really focus on all three when they're actually going into debate in any sort of campaign discussions and campaign town halls that he might be having. They have to talk about all three. You know, so on top of being, you know, Trump being a ballot box issue, they can't forget about all the other important issues that have to be dealt with in Canada in parallel. You know what? And you know, you're looking at Prime Minister Carney. There's advantages and disadvantages in terms of voting for him, and we talked a little bit about them today and in previous episodes. You know, we're talking about his inexperience. We're talking about you know, excess baggage in terms of him divesting himself and putting his assets into a trust fund, into a holding fund. You know, then you go back to Poilievre, and you know, you're talking about his. We talked about his security or the lack of pursuing his security credentials. You know, we talk about Poilievre basically dropping 22 points in terms of a lead that he had 6-7 months ago over the Liberal Party to its non-existence and now trailing. That's something he's going to have to talk about directly to Canadians during the debate. And the other thing, unfortunately for Mr. Poilievre, he's been in the political circuit for some time right now under Harper's administration, and now as leader of the PC, and being, you know, as you mentioned, a pretty good opposition leader. He's going to have to respond to Canadians to some of the decisions and some of the votes he has made over the last 10 to 12 years during his political career, where they may not have been very popular in terms of what Canadians might think in terms of his position. You know, we're talking about, you know, his voting records against raising minimum wage, for example. He was completely against it. How are Canadians going to respond to that? You know, voting against the first home savings account program, or voting against $10 a day child daycare. Well, these are very important to regular Canadians. And you know what? That's not going to work very well for him, because those are all attack points that the NDP leader and the Liberal leader can use against him during that. So, you know what? We said months ago, and we said very recently, this was an election. This was Pierre Poilievre's election to lose, although Trump helped him get to the point he's at right now, unfortunately. But it's still his election to lose, and let's see how he handles himself in terms of the debate, because that's going to be a critical point for him to turn this election around. In my opinion, lose the debate, he's done.
Yeah, there's no turning back from there, for sure. All right, well, coming up, the Great One's legacy. Has his friendship with, speaking of, the US president blemished his legacy? So if you're thinking about starting your own YouTube channel and or live stream, you should have a look at Ecamm. That's the app I use to produce this stream. It's one-stop, covering everything you need to produce a professional-looking stream. There is an affiliate link in the comments or description below. So if you want to check out Ecamm, click on that and have a look. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with what you can do with it. It's a lot of fun working with it as well. All right, so now let's get on with this. And that is Wayne Gretzky. widely regarded as the greatest hockey player of all time. His records, skill, and impact on the game are unmatched, but in recent years, his name has been linked to more than just hockey. His public support and association with US President Donald Trump has sparked debate among fans and critics alike. And that spilled over during the recent Four Nations hockey tournament. Gretzky was named the honorary captain of the Team Canada. That didn't sit well with some Canadian fans, and especially when he appeared at the championship game in Boston minus the Team Canada jersey and seen giving a thumbs up to the US team as he passed their bench after hardly acknowledging Team Canada.
And coming out of the entrance of the United States as top of that.
There you go. So has the Great One's legacy been blemished? We want to hear what you think. Jump into the comments now. Eddie, your thoughts on this?
Well, you know what? First, I'll start by saying, there's always this debate, Wayne Gretzky or Mario Lemieux. Well, I've always been a Mario Lemieux fan, okay? But there's nothing that takes away from the greatness of Wayne Gretzky in the National Hockey League. And very quickly, I mean, brilliant career. I'm sure I'm just repeating myself, but brilliant career. I mean, he was 17 when he entered the pro leagues with the Indianapolis Racers and Oilers in 1978, and he entered the NHL in 1979 with the Oilers, Edmonton Oilers. I mean, he talked about 1,400 plus games, 894 goals, which Ovechkin's going to break very soon. Points, 2,800, 4 Stanley Cups, 61 official NHL records. I mean, the man is an absolute legend, along with a lot of other legends that built the NHL, and along with Mario Lemieux, a lot of great hockey players. All right, so he certainly did achieve and mark his place in the hockey world, not just the NHL, but the hockey world. And then you talk about the personal side of him. I mean, he's a happily married man. I believe he has three children, well-off children. I mean, of course, he lives in the United States right now. What we have to talk about is humanity. Nice, soft-spoken gentleman. He's a philanthropist, of course. Most of his philanthropy activity goes through the Wayne Gretzky Foundation and the Make-A-Wish Foundation. So, yeah, that's absolutely wonderful of the human being. He was also, if I'm not mistaken, awarded Canada's highest civilian honor in getting the Companion of the Order of Canada, which is a very, very prestigious award that was given to him. So as a human being, he's done extremely, extremely well for himself in terms of securing his legacy as a Canadian. Until recently, Gary, you're absolutely right. A lot of head scratching, that's going on. I mean, one of the first things that I was kind of surprised about when this whole industry of online gambling after it got deregulated in North America, he was one of the first people that started promoting online gambling. And I kind of scratched my head about that one, but okay. A lot of professionals jumped on the bandwagon in promoting that. And then you kind of see him wearing MAGA caps from time to time, regular visitor to Mar-a-Lago. We saw him present at Trump's inauguration in January, and then also pictures of him celebrating Trump's victory at Mar-a-Lago. You kind of scratch your head. I mean, I have nothing against the individual with his political convictions, voting Republican or voting Democrat or whatnot. I think what a lot of Canadians like myself have a problem with is cozying up to Donald Trump. It's not a Republican thing. It's a Donald Trump thing that I think Canadians have a hard time with. And I think that actually came to the forefront, as you mentioned, and you're showing right now during the Four Nations tournament. During pregame ceremonies, he was very much pro-American in terms of his mannerisms. Like I said, giving the thumbs up and so on and so forth. And I believe at the end of the actual game, he presented red caps to the Canadian players that bore the words, "Be great." Like, what is that all about? I mean, how can you not see that as a Canadian in a very negative light? So, has he done himself any favors in terms of securing his legacy moving forward as a great one? I personally think it has been tarnished somewhat, and I think it will continue to be tarnished as long as he continues with his support, although not directly but indirect support of Donald Trump, just by his continued association. It just doesn't sit right with me, based on a lot of the quite a few newspaper columns that I've gone through and online social media. Most Canadians are not happy with how he's conducting himself as what we consider a Canadian icon, and someone who is a part of Canadian lore and culture, is associating himself that closely to the Trump regime, if you want to call it. And it's unfortunate to see. I believe his legacy has been certainly tarnished, for sure, no question about it.
Do you think, Eddie, that this is overblown? Especially the whole thing with the association with the U.S. president?
Yeah, well, you know what? Let's think about it. Let's draw a parallel here. Bobby Orr, I mean, one of the greatest hockey players ever to put on skates. Boston Bruin, out of Ontario. He's a Trump supporter as well. But I don't think that the media coverage or people's perspective in terms of their opinion of him was as aggressively challenged, okay, as Wayne Gretzky's. Both icons, both legends in Canada. As Canadians, I don't think Orr's convictions as a Canadian were challenged as much as Wayne Gretzky's is today. Why is that, Gary? I really don't know, but I think it's because a lot of it has to do with the publicity and the attention that was being paid to the Four Nations tournament, especially after the fact of what President Trump is trying to do with Canada in terms of trying to strong-arm us. Canadian patriotism has been shooting off the charts because of that. And to see one of our own associated with somebody that's directly attacking our country, of most recent being Wayne Gretzky. Bobby Orr supported them before the election, but that's a past thing, I think. It's just not boding well with a lot of Canadians in terms of Gretzky's position on this. And I think one of the other things too as well, excuse me, one of the things as well is Wayne Gretzky has been completely silent on the subject. He has not made any comments. I think the only people that have actually come to his defense, believe it or not, are his wife, which basically came out and said it's very sad to see so many Canadians against Wayne, her husband, and I get that. Donald Trump, of course, defended him, and he actually stated that. Bobby Orr, in publications, has also said that it's not fair for how Canadians are unhappy with Wayne's position, and everybody is entitled to opinion in terms of their political allegiances, their religious affiliations. Absolutely. This is not, like I said, a Republican thing. This is a Donald Trump thing, which most Canadians consider extremely vile as a human being, let alone president of the United States in what's supposed to be called the free world. So, yeah, you know what? He's not getting a fair shake, but I think the criticality of this position was just so much high with so much higher exposure happening during the Four Nations tournament. If it was Bobby Orr that did that, I think he'd be bearing the brunt of the pain as well. It just so happened that it was Wayne Gretzky. So I do feel for him. It's not fair, but you know what? This is the way Canadians feel about their country. And they would expect icons and legends of Canada to be equally defending Canada against whatever Donald Trump is proposing or waging against Canada. And that's the disappointing part, that he's not there for Canadians.
Yeah, and it didn't help either when Trump came out while Trudeau was still Prime Minister and suggested that Gretzky should run for Prime Minister. He thought that he would make a great Prime Minister.
That didn't help Wayne's cause either. That's for sure.
Yeah. So it seems to have died down, but I know like leading up to the final and then after the game, it died down a bit because we ended up winning,
Winning, right?
but still there you still see some comments lingering as to what was he thinking, and
Yeah.
people really upset about it. But you made some really good points, um, and he's probably very very smart not to be even addressing the whole situation. Don't give it legs, let it die.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it is starting to fade away, and by tomorrow there'll be a TikTok, and there will be something else for us to pick on. And Joe says Wayne Gretzky and wife attended Donald Trump's inauguration. The optics are not great. Nope, they're not.
No.
No, no.
I don't. This might blow over, Gary, but I think moving down, if in 6 months, a year, 2 years from now, Canadians don't forget, right? We're the type of animal that just does not forget when somebody's kicked you very hard in the shin. And you know what? I think this was more than the kick to the shin for a lot of Canadians, and they're not going to forget about this. Are they going to be a little more compassionate with them? Maybe, but I still think that the subject of our third segment here is his legacy tarnished. I think so. I don't think Canadians are going to forget about this.
No, and now with social media, there's always a record somewhere.
True, true.
It's there. Ask 3 conservative candidates and 1 liberal. Well,
Yeah.
3 conservative candidates in particular.
True.
So, all right, Eddie, that's a wrap for tonight. I want to thank you for viewing and your comments. Remember, the conversation doesn't stop here. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below if you're watching later on. Night Talk returns in 7 days from Montreal. I'm Gary MacDonald. Good night. Good night, Eddie.
And for the last time from Tulum, Eddie Tkallik, good night. Thanks for everything.